Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. And I would invite the public to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you, everybody. Does everyone agree we have the best version of O Canada? Yes. You can't hear me? Gosh, I'm sorry. What should I do? I'll come sit over there. I'll shout. I don't know what. I'll hold the microphone up. Are there any? We have no regrets that I know of this evening. Welcome, everybody. And we have a declaration of pecuniary interest. Councillor Knowles declared a pecuniary interest with respect to item 4 in the 2019 budgets for business improvement areas in the Administrative Services Committee meeting, as he is the shareholder, director, and CEO of a corporation that is a member of the Kerr Village Business Improvement Area. And I now ask for confirmation or corrections of the minutes of the previous council meetings. That would be the minutes of the regular session of council on April 2nd and the minutes of the regular session of Planning and Development Council on April 15th. And I wonder if I've got a mover. Councillor Lischina, and a seconder, Councillor Chisholm, all in favor. And the minutes are approved. We have no public presentations, but we do have delegations. Madam Clerk, would you call the delegations?
The first delegation is Andrew Merrick, who is speaking to item 5 of the Community Services Committee meeting of April 23rd regarding encroachment at 27 Walker Street.
Welcome, Mr. Merrick. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, this is my first time in front of council. I don't know if I answer questions or if I have 2 minutes of prepared remarks.
You have up to 10 minutes to present information to council, and if any council member has questions, they will then ask it, and there's no time limit on questions and answers.
Okay. I don't need 10 minutes. I think there's a Raptors game at 8. So thank you, Mayor Burton and City Councillors, for the opportunity to speak tonight about this matter. Last Tuesday evening at, I think it's called the Community Services Committee, we discussed this issue at length. And thank you very much for the transparency and the conversation, the dialogue that happened that evening. Very briefly, the version of the facts. My wife and I are property owners at 27 Walker and have lived there in our current house for 25 years. During that time, we've raised 3 children, and we've had 2 different renovations on the property, one in 1999 and one in 2014. We have submitted and complied with all town applications and permits for both of those renovations. In mid-2017, I sought a variance for a small addition off the back of the house, and at that time we were informed by staff that it did not comply with, I think it's percent GFA or lot area. At that time, I promptly withdrew my variance application. Subsequent to that discussion, I received a request from the staff to remove a fence on city property. Much to our surprise, because the fence has existed in its current location for 25 years, perhaps longer. The house was built in 1951. So last Tuesday night, we talked about this at length, and I'd like to share some mitigating factors that distinguish this from perhaps other situations. The fence does not restrict access to the public in any meaningful way. In fact, all the pedestrian traffic on Chisholm Street is on the opposite side. There's a very wide sidewalk with lampposts, a couple park benches, and a large community post box. Even if the space was required on our side of the road, there's 10 feet of grass between where the fence currently sits and the roadway. We see lots of dogs walking on that property. Importantly, the fence is a sturdy fence, well-designed, and it does not limit any sight lines for city traffic, so it's quite a safe fence. The other important consideration I ask you to think about tonight is moving the fence onto city property would create significant damage to a well-established garden. Now, my father-in-law and my wife have insisted on a lengthy list. I won't bore you, but rare columnar Japanese maples, climbing hydrangeas, some dogwoods, rose of Sharon, etc. A fence in that location would destroy the property. Lastly, and most importantly, the fence does not interfere with any utilities. The water mains are on Walker Street. The bell lines and the Cogeco lines I've personally seen installed are outside the fence line. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge the potential concern for neighborhood support. I think that was raised by one of the councillors last week. In the last couple of days, I've gone to every house in my neighborhood and I have signed documents all in support of leaving the fence where it is. In fact, what they have said to me is, it's a pretty fence. Why move it for no good reason? What good could come of that? So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions? Councillor Elger.
So are you okay if it is registered on title about where the fence is and whose property it's on?
I'm not sure I know what that means, but as long as it stays, I'm fine with that.
Unless something happens that the town puts a sidewalk and wants to do it. Like, I
Yeah.
just want to make it clear, because we discussed it at Community Services, that that is in fact true.
Absolutely clear, Councillor. If the town needs the land for a turning lane or for a sidewalk, we'll take it out.
Okay.
It's not obvious to me that that's required right now, but yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question regarding the future of the property. I understand your reply, but if you were to sell the home or if the property were to change hands, would it be fair at that time for it to come back, have the fence removed from the town property?
At that point, that's reasonable. Yes. So we plan on staying hopefully for another 25 years, so we'd like the garden to stay put.
All right, and so having that on title doesn't pose any problem?
No.
Thanks.
You'll be there, Dave.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oh, there we go. Are you seeing this report? We just got a memo from our staff with respect to annual estimated cost to maintain this on an annual basis of a fee.
So this was raised last week. I've not seen the report yet as to the cost.
Well, I think that would have some bearing, Your Worship, with respect to it. I'm a little concerned on this estimate that's been brought forward at the last minute, and I'm really concerned about the fees that we're applying here. So I don't know where the discussion, if we're going to separate this report or where we go with this, but I do have a concern.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Grant.
On Tuesday last week, you'd mentioned this was a major concern for the local community association. Do you have anything from the community association today?
So the Community Association is very much aware of it, but as you know, they remain neutral on a lot of these issues. But I have 18 homeowners up and down my street that have all said that they support the location of the
Although
fence.
you did say last Tuesday that this was something that they were watching and they were very concerned about and they were going to give us a letter about. So
I didn't say they'd give us a letter, but I can tell you that they're very supportive of it. And I sat on the WRHA, and it was a board member, and I have a lot of their support.
right, but you don't have a letter from them.
No, I didn't ask for a letter.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Merrick.
Thank you.
Mr. Solicitor, could somebody on staff give Mr. Merrick a copy of the report that Councillor Chisholm was speaking about?
Next delegation is Chris Wilson and Michael Marchetti, here to speak to item 10 of the Administrative Services Committee meeting of April 23rd regarding the Bronte Harbor Banquet and Conference Center.
Welcome, Mr. Wilson. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Mr. Mercanti sends his regrets this evening. He is unable to attend. For those who have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Chris Wilson. I'm the owner and operator of Cove Bar and Restaurant. Until last month, we were Yolanda's, the old stone boats. I'm sure everyone will know that location. And we are a sister company to Edge Hospitality, which up until the end of last year operated the restaurant and banquet facilities at the Harbor Banquet Center. And what we're a little bit concerned with is, as we just found out last week about the intention to put a pop-up restaurant in for the next 2 summers, is the fact that, we believe the town is obliged to deal with properties like this in an open, fair, and transparent manner. And this seems to be a sole source contract they're looking for. Nobody that we can talk to has been approached otherwise with their ideas to put something in there. It's been known for quite a period of time that we would be out of there. The Harbor Banquet Center would cease to operate at the end of last year, and yet nothing was put forward to the public at that time. And now I understand there is a time constraint with the wish to get something in there for the summertime. To address that, we are still currently, not we, but Edge Hospitality, the liquor license holder for the property, whereas it would take 10 to 12 weeks to apply for a new liquor license. And essentially, at the end of the day, we would just like the chance to be able to present a bit of our own, to be able to operate something in this property.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Chris, for coming. I'm just a little confused. So is the Cove still a part of Edge Hospitality Group or no?
We are affiliated through the family affiliation with Edge, but we're not part of Edge Hospitality.
Okay. And Edge had the previous lease on the Compass Banquet Center.
That's right, yes.
Okay, because we had tried and offered, and we had a delegation in here last year from Edge saying that they no longer wanted to extend the lease that we were offering till 2020 on that place, and they asked to terminate it early as of December of 2018. So I'm a little confused as to, I guess Edge had the opportunity to continue running that place until 2020, and they declined and asked this council to cease it prematurely in December of last year, which we obliged to, and now we're here, and I'm kind of wondering, was that maybe you can help me connect the dots on this, as to
Sure,
why.
I can't speak for Edge Hospitality. As I said, we're not exactly a part of that, but it was my understanding that they were hoping to amend the terms of the lease, and that was not presented as an option at that time, to alter in any way the lease, just to continue it, and they were not interested in that. But they were not presented with an opportunity to do something different as it is being presented now.
Okay.
Nor was.
Sure, and will you still have some interest when we do go to an RFP after we hopefully finally get some purchase? We can purchase the building with that at that time. Would you still be interested in going and in being involved in an RFP at that time?
I can't speak to Edge Hospitality, but I know our company, Michael and I, certainly would be interested.
Okay, well, I think that's still on the table, so
Of
thank you
course.
very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir, for your information.
Thank you.
Council, that completes the delegations. I now bring you to the Community Service Committee report. And as I understand it, there's some interest in some separations here. I'm going to need a pencil, I think, to keep track. Item 5 has been requested to be separated. Are there any other requested separations from CSC? I'm not seeing any. So can I have a mover and seconder for the balance of CSC? Councillor Dudek, Councillor Elgar. May I put the vote? All in favor? And the balance of CSC is adopted. And now, it was Councillor Grant asked for separation of item 5. Councillor Grant?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to separate that. I have a bit of a concern where we're going with the vote that we had at council or at the committee last weekend. It was a close vote. It was 3-4. I believe we are setting a precedent, despite the fact that those who wanted to move the motion against the staff recommendation didn't want to create a precedent. For those of us who were back in council in 2005, 2006, we might remember there was an area where residents had a beautiful flower and lush vegetable gardens that went deep into town property near a community park. Those homeowners who lived in areas established back in the 1950s believed they had a right to use these lands, but no one said anything differently. Unfortunately, though, when we went to look at those local properties, we learned that the land belonged to the community, not to the individuals. So without exception, we told those people they had to tear back those wonderful gardens and pull them back to their own property line. During that time, I had one Ukrainian grandmother call me in tears over her established root vegetable garden being ruined, and that's something that's stuck with me since then. So here we are, it's 2019, we have a similar situation, and we have this one resident who's established a garden on land that's not theirs and wants us to change the rules for them. I guess the big difference is that there are utility junctions under this property, which we've learned still exist from the document we received today, and they want them to change the rules for them. Some CSC members are willing to let the homeowner buy their way out of this problem, but I remain concerned that we are changing rules unfairly and setting a precedent, and I don't think that we should do this. Our own legal staff have cautioned once again that the utilities are all within a fence encroachment, and any privilege afforded to the property owner could cause a loss of response during an emergency, again, in this document we got today. So given this, I'd ask members of council respect the history of the decisions we've made and the desire not to set an unfortunate precedent and approve option 1 from CSC, not continue with option 2. And have this fence move back to the property line and not on the municipal boulevard. Thank you very much.
Councillor Roberts?
My other response in the same token is that if the owner wants to sell the property at some point, that fence should already be moved. It shouldn't be a sale sign on that property showing that there's extra land, no matter how he does the title or anything. It should be done now so that the garden is now set for 20 years from now if he wants to sell, and not have a garden showing on town property.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much. I will vote against the committee recommendation as I did at the committee. Should the committee recommendation fail, then I would like to move that the report encroachment at 27 Walker Street from the Department of Engineering and Construction dated April 1st, 2019 be received, and that staff be directed to proceed with option 1 as noted in the report. At committee, for those who weren't there, I spoke about a number of issues that we've faced over the years, certainly within Ward 6, and I know elsewhere around town, where homeowners have encroached onto parkland, onto conservation land, and in every one of those cases, our staff have required the homeowners to remove the encroachments. We've, in some cases, given them a little bit of extra time to make those removals happen, but we've made them remove the encroachment. In every one of those cases that I'm aware of, there were basically, people were not taking over sidewalks, they weren't taking over trails, so there is exactly like this kind of case where the public weren't being, stopped from using a piece of infrastructure, but they were the homeowners were encroaching onto public land, just as this case is. And in every one of those cases, we required the removal of the encroachment. And so for fairness and for ensuring that we don't set a precedent, I believe we should do the same here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify on CSC, we've approved option 2 as it stands with the recommendation to come forward with more information. I have concerns about the added information that's just been received. So in the procedure here, I would assume we would have to, we would vote on option 2 as it stands, and then from there we would have discussion on if it falls, and we have discussion on further coming up with a motion for the next resolution. Is that correct? Okay. So I would probably want to speak after our vote on option 2, which has been approved by.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanju?
Or I have the option to speak on it now.
You can speak anytime you want.
Okay. What my understanding is here with respect to this issue, to me, it's a win-win situation with respect to option 2. Understanding, and I've visited the site and included that yes, there's encroachment, but in this area, it is an old growth area, and I would suggest there's a lot of encroachments that have been minor encroachments throughout this neighborhood, and the reality of it is an old area. Moving this and making this movement, to me, is redundant with respect to we can come up with a solution. I think council has to be receptive to the opportunities that are available to us and something that would work for both the homeowner and council. But I do have an issue. I don't have an issue with the cost of putting this together, but I do have an issue when all of a sudden something's come up of an annual fee of $4,500 to $6,000 as an estimate to continue on with this encroachment agreement on an annual basis. I think that's far out overreach on our position as a town, but that's my opinion. However, I'll just leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Santier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank staff for their report and obviously legal counsel for spending the amount of time to provide this information. It's very helpful. And I also appreciate the advocacy provided by the ward councillors in this particular situation. I'm not part of CSC, so I have a couple of questions. I'm hoping that I can get some clarity from staff on the amount of encroachment. And the other question that I have is, we have information here on page 2 of this new report. It talks about the utility agencies and their lines underground. Do we know if those are live lines or the old lines from 25, 50 years ago?
The information that we have from the Bell and Cogeco is that they are live lines and still usable.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any information on how much of the encroachment there is, like how much property is actually being encroached on?
So I think the report sets out there's about 3 meters beyond the fence line itself, and the utilities are located behind the fence in that area.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Elger.
Thank you very much. I was at CSC, and what I found the most interesting is this gentleman has actually done 2 home renovations, one in 1999, another one in 2014, when in fact nothing came up about this. So they've been there for 25 years. The fence has been there 25 years. And I'm happy with how the committee came up with the resolving it, in that it will be registered on title. In fact, if Bell needs to use it for anything, they have a free carte blanche to go in there, same with Cogeco. And if the town decides they're going to ever put a sidewalk in, that's a given also. So because of all the conditions and because it's been there for 25 years and the person has actually done 2 renovations and it didn't bubble to the top, that's how I got around. I can support this, because normally I wouldn't. In my own ward, we've had issues, but it seems to be always site plan issues around a corner where people complain they can't see the stop sign. So in this case, I'm happy with how the town staff have resolved it to the satisfaction of the committee. I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elger. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support this as well. I mean, it says right in our memo, you know, in case of an emergency, there still could be valuable time lost if the fence needs to come down. Valuable time lost in the case of an emergency. Just because it hasn't happened in 20 years, I didn't expect the major floods that happened that we've had either, but it's happening now, and you don't know what's going to happen. And I certainly would not want to be here when an emergency happens and time is lost and something goes awry. On top of that, we had beautiful flowers that were planted into the encroach on water's edge, and we made them all get removed. It was a part of the Oakville Horticultural Society's pathway. We had them removed because they were encroaching. They were incredibly beautiful things. We had them removed. There's people in our ward, 3 or 4 of them at least, who have had to spend tens of thousands of dollars because they did that. That's been removed. I agree with Councillor Grant on this. You know, either we're holding firm or we're not. And I think we all have been of the same ilk for a while, but I can't support this motion as it stands now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. So if everybody's had their say for now, we need 2 members of council to move and second the committee recommendation in order to test it. Councillor Dudek and Councillor Chisholm. And may I put the vote? All those in favor of the encroachment, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's close, but the motion fails. So now we need a Counselor Adams, you indicated you had a motion.
That's right. I move that the report encroachment at 27 Walker Street from the Department of Engineering and Construction dated April 1st, 2019 be received, and that staff be directed to proceed with option 1 as noted in the report.
Is there a seconder? Counselor Grant. May I put the vote? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's close, but the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Let's turn to administrative services now. We have a request by Councillor Giddings to separate out item 8, the former Brentwood School update, to propose a revision to clause 2. And we also have a supplementary report to item 10 on the Brawny Harbor Banquet and Conference Center. And so, let's consider that 8 and 10 are separated, and we'll look for a motion for the balance. Councillor Lischina and Councillor O'Meara, may I put the vote? All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And that brings us to item 8, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been before council several times for the new members of council. That has to do with the Southeast Oakville Community Center and the sale of lands at Brantwood Public School. And the funds from that are going to recharge the reserves for the town. And so under the second recommendation, it says that the staff be authorized to issue a public tender for the sale of the 7 future residential lots. And I'd like to revise that to say the sale of the 6 northern future residential lots. That allows 1 additional lot to be kept in the community. This space has been used for close to 100 years by children in the neighborhood. And tonight we have an opportunity to preserve an important piece of that and let the kids keep playing there. And further, with the lift in values, I think that our reserves will be shown to be kept the same as previously. And that is my recommendation. All the others, 1, 3, and 4 remain the same.
So you're moving the item 8 as presented with the addition of this remark about reducing the number of lots to be sold.
From 7 to 6, yes.
And what about this other item that I was handed up about delaying? I beg your pardon. You know, and I thought the acoustics in here were so great. So as I understand it, you've moved the report as presented with the addition of reducing the amount of land for sale. And I've been handed up an item that also speaks to delaying the sale. And is that part of this motion?
It could be, Mr. Mayor. I guess the concern is that we'd like both of them to pass, and we don't want to run the risk of one going forward and dragging the other one along with it.
Well, let me ask the counselor who handed it to me.
So I think that we should resolve whether or not we're going to support Councillor Giddings' motion, and then I'd like to make the motion in regards to, it's not, as it reads, it's the town staff include as a condition of the sale of Brentwood residential lots, that the current park remain open and accessible to the public until the new community center and park are open in the fall of 2020. But I would prefer to do it as 2 separate motions.
Well, we have a procedure that is designed for you guys, and that
Awesome.
is we separate items into their pieces on anybody's request, and as your chair, I'm going to do that for you. And so I would suggest that we first accept, and are you seconding the motion?
Yes, sir, I'm seconding the motion. I think it's can I speak to it?
In one moment.
Okay.
So Councillor Giddings, we're moving part 1, part 2, give me the parts we're moving here and adding.
We're revising number 2.
We're revising number 2, and we're otherwise moving 1, 2,
1,
3,
3, 4.
and
Yes.
4. And we have a 5th that is added by Councillor
Yet to come, yes.
Haslett-Thiel. So Moved without any controversy whatsoever are parts 1, 3, and 4, and I would propose to take a vote on those. Is that everybody's agreement? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Congratulations, we made some decisions here. Now we have item number 2 as revised by Councillor Giddings. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Burton. There's a bit of history here, and at one point, the town was going to have 9 lots here, I understand. So they went to the residents, and everybody agreed to 7 lots. So has something changed that we don't know about with regard to the decision that the council made based on the staff's negotiations with everyone?
The initial was 9 lots to be sold out there based on discussions with the community and a resolution by council. It was reduced to 7 lots and a parkette kept on the corner.
Okay, that's kind of how I remembered it too. Thank you very much for that. So in that regard, then I really can't support Councillor Giddings' motion that we have before us, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I completely understand where my Ward 3 Council colleagues are coming from on this. I understand the efforts to try and squeeze every last drop you can out of the orange on this. But I would say that though we have made potentially more money on these because of the increase in sales, there's so many factors that go into costs. We're now paying 25% steel and aluminum tariff that we weren't when we went down this path. We have a number of things that balance out. We've thrashed this out 2 or 3 times already. So unfortunately, Councillor Giddings and Hazathiel, I respect it, but I won't be able to support this.
Any other speakers? May I put the vote?
No.
Councillor Hazathiel.
So having been a part of this process for quite some time, but on the other side of the podium, I would just point out that, we speak in the strategic plan tonight that will probably get passed about the environment's a pillar. And we state an absolute goal of protecting green space. And I know all of us value parks. And if additional park space came available in your areas, I think that we would want to look to the strategic plan and to that pillar to say, what's the right decision here? If it's our goal to protect green space, then we need to do it wherever we can. Mayor Burton, your plan to buy the school lands, to provide certainty and to control the land development was nothing short of brilliant, and it's worked. Today, the value of the 6 lots is significantly greater than was expected of the 9 lots, and we will reap those benefits. I would suggest that providing 1 additional lot would allow us to celebrate the thoughtful redevelopment that's occurred on those lands and the history that we all take pride in celebrating, and that we recognize that green space can never be returned. And so I will be supporting my fellow councillors' motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers? May I put the vote? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? It's close, but it fails. And then we have item 5, which is this timing request. We do need a motion to pass item number 2 as presented. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Giddings and Councillor O'Meara, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Thank you. Now we have this new item 5, which is that town staff include as a condition of sale of the Brentwood residential lots that the current park remain open and accessible to the public until the new community center and park are open in the fall of 2020. So we have a request for a timing delay that cleverly doesn't try to delay the sale, only the construction that follows it, if I'm being clear and if I'm not distorting your intention. So, Councillor Hazathiel, would you like to speak first about this?
Sure. So, while I'm disappointed about the last motion, this park is widely used. I mean, every day, kids are in that park with friends and family. It's a heart and soul of that neighborhood. If we proceed as it's written by the staff,
that park would get closed this fall. And there would be no park, so that park's closed. And the community center with the replacement park, which we have all talked about, it is a replacement park for Brantwood, will not open till the fall of 2020. And so this is just in deference to let the kids play on the park. And once that community center and park is open, then then proceed with doing what you need to do with the last 2 of the lots. I'm open to suggestions on the wording, but the intent is to keep the park open for the kids until the community center opens.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there other speakers? Councillor Adams?
Could I just ask our staff what the implications are of this in terms of the process and how things are supposed to move forward? What wrinkles does it create? What are the pros and cons?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through actually conversations with Realty as late as last week, we did look at some options of separating the sale out so it would allow for the continued use of the community of the park area, the basketball nets in essence. It does create 2 distinct parcels, so it slows down the 2 lots as opposed to the other piece. Any complication you add to a real estate deal will have an impact on the overall price. There is the potential of selling in phases, first phase to a developer and to the same developer the second phase so that he or she can continue on with the redevelopment. That may not be feasible because they'll have equipment on at one time and then to move it on later on with the other 2 lots, again, adds to the cost of that overall proposal. If you sell to 2 different developers, which is an option, you could sell them separately to 2 separate people. You run the risk of a consistency along the street, and it delays the construction within the overall neighborhood, a neighborhood that's actually been subject to a fair amount of construction over the last several years. Staff did look, those would be the implications of separating the 2 from the balance of it. Staff had recommended that we sell the whole thing as a package, the single-family lots.
So staff's recommendation still stands with respect to
Yes.
not separating it and not delaying this element for the various reasons that you've.
That's right.
Thank you very much. As a result of our staff's comments, I'm not going to support the requested amendment. I understand what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it, but I also hear what our staff are saying, and I slightly prefer that.
Councillor Duddick, and then Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it makes perfect sense to what the councillor is proposing. I most definitely will be supporting it. I don't see how this is going to be such a make or break item, given the fact that, as she pointed out, until that community center is up and running, you are shortchanging the community in terms of their green space and their enjoyment of the area. I mean, with all due respect, the commissioner's comments regarding the construction in the area, they're dealing with the community center too. So, I mean, I get that. But on the other hand, if it means that we still go with the original plan of 7 lots, which I support, I think leaving this open for the remainder until the construction is complete on the community center makes perfect sense. And I most definitely will support.
Councillor Elgar.
That's a question of staff. We talked about the timing of the sale of the lots. So I'm hearing it'd be like 5 now and 2 later. Is it better, based on the way things seem to be going with land prices here in Oakville, if we just held off, then don't sell anything until you can sell all 7 at once, then we don't get into all this complication you mentioned? What's the problem with doing that for the town councilors?
That's what they said they want to do.
They want to wait?
No, they want to sell all 7.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm thinking. That's why I don't disagree. Don't sell any right now. They're all ready to go. Hold them a year until the community center gets open.
Well, let me ask this question, would you, Council? If we, looking at what Councillor Haslett-Deal has written, I believe that it's implied here something that would be clearer if we added a couple of words. So let me just float this past you. That town staff include as a condition of the sale of the Brantwood residential lots, that the closing allow the current park to remain open and accessible to the public until the new community center and park are open in the fall of 2020. Would that not work for everybody?
Well, that's what she's actually asking for.
That's what you meant, right?
That's what she's asking.
But what, the answer we had got into, this many lots and that many lots, and so, how about we include those words for greater clarity?
That would be great.
All right, is everybody happy with that? May I put the vote? Now, this is all in favor? Opposed, if any? That one was really close, it carried fully, so thank you, everybody. No, sorry? Sorry, those against? Okay, it's still close, but it carried, thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. I think we came to a bit of a modus vivendi there, a way to live together on this. Let's turn to the supplementary report to item 10 on the April 23rd Administrative Services Committee, Bronte Harbor Banquet and Conference Center, the restaurant and patio plan. We needed that separated to deal with the following motion, for which I'm looking for a mover and seconder, that staff be authorized to enter into an agreement with Catch for the operation of a seasonal restaurant and patio in the Bronte Harbor Banquet and Conference Center located at 2340 Ontario Street on terms satisfactory to the CAO and town solicitor based on the terms set out in the confidential appendix attached to this report. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor O'Meara, do I have a seconder? Councillor Robertson, do I have questions or discussion? May I put the vote? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. It's just actually a question of staff. I'm hoping they might be able to respond just to the delegation we heard at the beginning here. If they might be able to just talk about the situation where we are able to go in sole source procurement as opposed to RFP, and perhaps the reasons why we've done that here, and what is on the horizon as we move down the road with this facility.
Through you, Mayor Burton, in our procurement policies, when we're purchasing goods and services, we go out through a competitive system. On realty matters, rental of property, our practice is to engage an outside real estate firm who would then market the property. It does not go through a competitive process in terms of procurement. It's when we find a tenant who's prepared to pay what is believed to be a market rent, we then bring that to council. So it's not a competitive where we get multiple offers in. And we have, for example, right now down on Cross Avenue at Trafalgar Road, we've had an outside agency who's been with us, I think, months and months in order to get a tenant in there, which you'll be getting a report in the very near future. In the case of the Bronte, we looked at going through the marketplace, hiring a realtor to go through a process would probably take us well into the summer. As staff, we were aware of an interest by the one party who is being recommended to entertain renting the property for the purposes of a pop-up. In your report, we've presented what his offering is. We've taken it out to a market expert who's confirmed for the type of situation we have down there. They're considering it to be a market rent. So you're not working contrary to your purchasing policies?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Haslett-Teal.
This is just a question for staff. So the gentleman that delegated was talking about he is the holder, or they are the holder of the liquor license. So if that is in fact the case, does that impact one of the terms and conditions that are being proposed?
The person that is offering to rent the property recognizes it. Will take him time to secure the license. That is his risk.
All right, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification on the CEO's comments on how did we become aware of the current interest? You said that staff became aware that there was a party interested. So if it didn't go to market, was that just, do we already have a relationship with the interested party?
We went through a fairly significant process of determining what the future uses of that building would be. And during that process, we interviewed restaurateurs from Mississauga to Hamilton. So we had a pretty good sense of what was going on in the market. The person who expressed interest was the only person who expressed interest that I'm aware of as we went through that process.
All right. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. I hope that turns into a success for the town and that the people who want more waterside entertainment are pleased. Council, I need to separate item 4 in the piece of item 4 having to do with the Kerr Street BIA to respect the declaration of pecuniary interest by Councillor Knoll. So may I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Longo and Councillor O'Meara, and Councillor Knoll will not participate in the vote. May I call the vote? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Congratulations to the Kerr Street BIA. It's carried and without any input from Councillor Knoll. Council, I now ask you if you would be good enough to agree to change the 2019 Council and Committee meeting schedule to include 2 additional Budget Committee meetings on July 9th and November 19th of 2019. And if you're willing to do that, I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Sandu and Councillor Adams, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And now, Council, after our extensive work on this, we have a final 2019-2022 Council Strategic Plan, and I'm looking for a mover and seconder. Councillor Lischina and Councillor Grant, are there any questions or comments or praise for anybody? Councillor Adams.
I have praise for our staff for going through this particular round with us. We've gone, as you know, we've gone through a number of iterations of our strategic plan, and this is the first one that we've done in a few rounds where we've, I think, really pulled apart the process a little bit more and gone through it in a lot more detail with each member of council providing input in more detail. And while nothing is ever perfect, this is, I think, a great step forward in terms of the outcome, covering off the various issues that a lot of members of council put forward as being important to their communities. And so I would like to thank our staff for capturing all of that input in as great detail as they have.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Well, may I put the vote then? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries, and thank you, everybody. Now, can we have a mover and seconder for the CAO Review Committee report? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Duddick. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Now, we have a confidential report from the Human Resources Department, and I need a mover and seconder for that report. Councillor Duddick and Councillor Robertson, thank you. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Now, Madam Clerk, what can I announce publicly?
You can do that now.
All of it now, right? All right. So we voted to receive a report from the Human Resources Commissioner, and we have voted to change a bylaw that appoints a Director of Emergency Planning and Fire Services for the town of Oakville, and to repeal a previous bylaw. And as a result, I and Council can congratulate Brian Durden for his appointment as Director of Emergency Planning and Fire Service, Fire Chief, on an extension of 2 years effective May 1st, 2019. And he's not here to receive our appreciation, but I will convey your unanimous support to him. And thank you, everybody. So now we have a bit of new business. So I believe what we want to do here, if I understand this correctly, is we want to waive procedure in order to take action on this walk-on item tonight. And that item is the appointment to the Halton Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee. And so the first thing I need is a mover and seconder to waive the procedure bylaw. Councillor Knoll, Councillor Giddings, all those in favor? And thank you, everybody, that carries. So now, I have moved, and I'm looking for a second. I think you have it. Councillor O'Meara, thank you. That whereas the Council of the Regional Municipality of Halton adopted the following resolution on April 17th, that the regional clerk forward a copy of report number LPS 3219 to the local municipalities, requesting the appointment of one councillor from each municipality to the Halton Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee. And whereas Halton is required to have specified committees for solid waste management as part of the conditions of approval for the Halton Waste Management Site, which remain in effect. And whereas in 2018, the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks advised that the Halton Waste Management Site Advisory Committee and the Joint Municipal Regional Waste Management Advisory Committee could be combined into a single committee while still fulfilling the conditions of approval. This is efficiency, folks. And whereas regional staff recommended that the two committees be merged into the Halton Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee, and whereas condition 1 in the conditions of approval provides that the region enter into agreements with the municipalities of the region to establish a waste management committee, and whereas traditionally this condition has been satisfied by requesting that the local municipalities each name one local or regional councillor to the membership of the Joint Waste Committee, therefore be it resolved that one of you be appointed to the Halton Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee for a term to expire November 14th, 2022. Do we have a volunteer? Councillor Giddings, do we have competition? Councillor Giddings, congratulations. So may I put the vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? Congratulations, Councillor Giddings. You are a solid guy. Thank you, thank you. Now we have an additional notice of motion distributed at the meeting regarding Sheridan College's universal pass transit item. I'm looking for it right now. I've got it. So everybody has this. This is moved by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Lischina. And it was my intent when I asked you to waive the procedure bylaw that it would apply to all of these. So I think I just want to make sure that I mention that so that it's understood. Councillor Adams and Councillor Lischina, in that order, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate Council's willingness to deal with this evening, as it's quite time sensitive. Councillor Lischina and I felt strongly to bring forward a motion of this nature tonight because of the long-standing desire to have a UPass program through Sheridan College. I'm going to read it into the record tonight because it's important, I think, for the community to understand what we're doing and why it's important. And it reads, whereas Sheridan College is one of Ontario's leading post-secondary institutions with over 40,000 full-time, continuing and part-time students attending campuses in Oakville, Mississauga, and Brampton, whereas the UPass, or Universal Pass programs, provide access to unlimited public transit to students at multiple campuses across Ontario in conjunction with local transit providers, whereas the provincial government's unfair policies around the optional student fees and the Student Choice Initiative are causing Sheridan College students to lose access to deeply discounted transit UPasses, despite students having voted in a referendum in November 2018 to support the implementation of a UPass program at Sheridan College, whereas municipal staff and representatives of Sheridan College and the Sheridan Students' Union have been working towards implementing the UPass in Oakville, Brampton, and Mississauga for numerous years, and we're in the process of finalizing the necessary agreements, whereas other UPass programs in the province have been allowed to continue, and whereas a Sheridan College UPass program would improve access to transit for students, reduce traffic congestion on roads, and support public transit across all the municipalities involved, be it resolved that the province of Ontario be requested to modify its rules to allow the Sheridan College UPass program to proceed, and that this resolution be forwarded to the cities of Mississauga and Brampton, Sheridan College, and the Sheridan Student Union to seek their support and their endorsement of this resolution, and that this resolution be forwarded to the MPPs of Halton and Peel, as well as the Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities, in order to seek their support for the changes. If you aren't familiar with UPass programs or Universal Pass programs are programs by which every student pays a small fee as part of their annual fees at their college, and in return get access to a transit program that allows them basically to have a transit pass across all the municipalities in which they're involved. This particular UPass program is quite complicated because it involves not just a single municipality, it involves three. It involves Mississauga, Brampton, and the town of Oakville, and it therefore takes three transit agencies to be involved in putting together an offer that's going to work for the municipalities, and an offer that'll be an outstanding offer for the students that are involved in being able to get not only around Oakville, but around Oakville, Mississauga, and Brampton, and between their campuses. If you aren't also aware, the shuttle bus that was run through Sheridan College has also been canceled as a result of the changes by the province and requiring students to be allowed to opt out of paying these various fees. So these kind of programs only work when every student pays a little piece of it. Otherwise, what if 90% of people opted out, all of a sudden you don't have a universal program? The term universal is very important. We have a situation here where the students at Sheridan College actually managed to get a referendum set up. They managed to get the required number of voters out to vote, and as all of us know here, it's not hard, it's a tough thing sometimes to get enough people out to show support for things. That referendum passed, and we were in the process, each of our staff members at each of the three cities involved, three municipalities involved, were involved in bringing forward the required documentation to get it passed through their councils. And it was during that process that the province changed the rules midstream. And so despite all of the college students being prepared to proceed with the UPass program, it was pulled out from under them just as it was about to get underway. The UPass program in Oakville has a long history. It goes back, I think, more than a decade, if I recall the first time discussions happened. This is 2005, my colleague says. So it goes back a really, really long time in the discussions. And we finally got it to a point where the student union was prepared to bring it to a referendum. They did that. It was a whole lot of work on the part of the students to get that referendum through. It passed. And as I said, just as we were about to get the paper signed, it got pulled out. So we're asking for the province to change the regulations that are involved. They have allowed every other standing UPass program to proceed. And this is one where, for lack of a couple of weeks' time, we've been denied. And it's unfair to our community. It would be a great, tremendous improvement to the traffic congestion, particularly along Trafalgar Road, where between the GO station and up to the campus, as many of you know, that's a point of massive congestion all the time. And being able to have students using our transit system would be a great improvement. So I would ask for a recorded vote, and I look forward to this moving to the other municipalities and the MPPs making some changes on behalf of their communities.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lischina?
Just to add a quick point is that Councillor Adams has been very passionate about this, given the traffic issues, the parking issues, as well as the environmental component of getting cars off the road. So I wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Then, in order to show your support for the resolution, please rise to be named. Councillor Sanju, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Longo, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Haslett-Deal, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Dudek, Councillor Robertson, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We now have a request for report moved by Councillor Palmer and seconded by Councillor Elgar. And I believe it's been distributed to you. May I put the vote? Councillor O'Meara.
Just have a question. I was of the understanding that we were already doing this from a staff perspective. I think we'd mentioned it at least 3 or 4 times this fall. Are we doing this already? I would ask staff.
I think, Councillor O'Meara, that if nothing else, the request in calling for a return of the report by July is putting a date on the wall that we haven't done before.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something outside of what I thought we were working on.
So I think our colleagues are asking us to to put, I think, I read this as putting on pressure. Councillor Sandier.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Just a quick question for staff around the wording of the report request. I see that we have here, or maybe even a question for Councillors Parmar and Elgar, implementation from other municipalities. I'd like a little bit more clarity on which municipalities we'd be touching base on. Specifically, I'd like to see maybe Burlington and a couple other closer municipalities included. But I'll leave it to the report requesters for more information if they'd like that clarity as well.
Well, I can tell you that on their behalf, I'll just say, as written, there's no limit to what municipalities would be looked at. And as a good practice, I think if you have any that you specifically want, you just fire a note to staff to be included. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Worship. To the mover and seconder of this report, I'm wondering if you could also include an analysis of the success or the experiences with respect to the street permit parking system. I know that when we were the councillor for Ward 7, that was a huge point of contention that there was no visitor parking because all the permits were taken for the residents. So I'd be interested to know more about whether that's been successful, whether it's something we should continue to do, whether we should reconsider. And I'm just wondering if you could include that in your report.
I think it's easily done, and I would submit clearly implied, but I've made a note, and I'll give it to the clerk to use under her bylaw to add it. May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is approved. I'm not aware of any more work in front of us, Council, except for the consideration and reading of bylaws. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to send condolences to Terry Hatchetson's family. He's a real estate agent in Oakville, and he's a long-term member of our Kerr Street Village BIA, and he passed away last week. So we do have a void in our group, and it was very sad in his passing.
Thank you very much. I join you in those condolences. Councillor Longo. Councillor Lischina.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Oakville Blades on winning the Buckland Cup on April 21st, sweeping the defending champs, the Wellington Dukes. Although it would have been fantastic if they won on home ice, but they were away, and I'm sure there were a lot of Oakville residents cheering for them. They have an amazing season. The Blades went 16-3-0 in the 2009 Ontario Junior Hockey League playoffs, winning the West Division and the Northwest Division, and those banners will be seen at 16 Mile Arena. Councillor Robertson and I had the pleasure of attending a lot of those games live, and they were definitely a lot of fun. Also, congratulations to Oakville Blades coach, Mike Tarantino, who won Coach of the Year. And I would personally like to thank the coach's dad, Mike Sr., being kind enough to help me understand why penalties are called. So that was very helpful. And the Blades begin their quest for the Dudley Hewitt Championship starting tomorrow. That's April 30th in Cochrane, Ontario. So we're wishing them well, and Oakville is rooting for you. Good luck.
Thank you, Councillor Lischina. Aren't you and I going to that game?
All the way to Cochrane.
All the way to Cochrane? Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton, just like to mention that tomorrow evening at Queen Elizabeth Community Centre, there's going to be a plenary of experts, and it's regarding youth mental health and prevention. There's going to be Dr. Janet Patterson, who's the Director of Emergency Psychiatry, St. Joseph's Hospital from Hamilton there. Melissa Graves, who's a health promoter from Halton Region Department. Michelle Bates, who's a mental health lead and manager of professional support staff, Halton District School Board. One other person, Kim Perry, who has had a very bad experience in his life, and he's willing to speak about it. He's talked all throughout Ontario and other provinces about the impact it has had when somebody dies from drug overdose. And another, Rebecca Tobey, who's the program director for the Road Youth Recovery, which is in Oakville, and it's at the ROAD stands for Recovery, Opportunity, Action, and Development. and it's for individuals 16 to 19 years of age. And it should be a very good thing to attend. I'm hoping people attend it, and I just hope that enough people come out. So, because it's something nobody wants to really talk about. It's everywhere else but not here. Based on statistics, it is in Oakville also. We have issues. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think that's a very constructive thing to do. Shah, I have a motion to approve the bylaws from Councillor Longo. Do I have a second? Councillor Dudek, thank you. This is for the bylaws as presented in the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and they are carried. That completes the work we had in front of us tonight. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and it's been terrific working with you, and we are adjourned.